Today is an exciting day because not only have we recognized Women's History Month here at the Council, but today I introduced the Montgomery County Pay Equity Act. Back in December, when I was sworn in, I started hiring my team for my office. And as I was talking with potential employees, the HR department was telling me that they needed pay stubs of those job applicants. And I thought it was odd that they were requesting this information. And so I began investigating. And lo and behold, I discovered that managers within the county have the discretion to rely on pay stubs to set pay grades, to determine their salary. And my legislation, the Montgomery County Pay Equity Act, will change that policy and forbid the county from relying on pay history to determine one's salary. Banning this practice is important because pay history is used to determine, when pay history is used to determine future salary, individuals get stuck in a cycle of being undervalued. And that cycle disproportionately affects women. At the statewide level, we know that women earn 79 cents to every dollar a man makes. And that figure is even worse for women of color. Here in the state of Maryland, African American women receive 69 cents to every dollar, and Latinas earn 47 cents to every dollar. And make no mistake about it, this problem is real here in Montgomery County. You should all have received some handouts that my team provided showing some of the information that we found here in Montgomery County. And there are two horrifying examples I want to share with you. One, in the Department of Health and Human Services, there were 13 employees hired during a period. 12 of them female, 1 of them a man. What I found is that that one man earns more than all 12 women he works with. In one case, $31,000 more the man makes than the lowest paid woman, and compared to the highest paid woman, he still makes $5,500 more than her. That is not fair, and that is not right. This information is being shared with the two infographics you see here, and one of the graphics shows that the longest serving female in that cohort still makes $30,000 less than that man does. The second example, not visualized here, I want to share with you is within the Department of Transportation. There were 4 individuals hired in the Department of Transportation, 1 woman and 3 men for a manager position. The woman has worked in that department twice as long as the man and makes less than every single one of them, from a range of $8,000 less than one man to $28,000 less than another. Who would have thought here in 2019 in progressive Montgomery County we would be dealing with this issue of pay equity? But here we are. And it's important that we have this conversation, shed some light on it so that we can correct it immediately. This legislation has received tremendous support from my colleagues who are here behind me, and all the county council members are signed on as co-sponsors. I want to thank all the other activists and workers of the county for their support of this legislation, and I'd like to take a few minutes for them to share their thoughts. First off, I'd like to introduce the council president, Nancy Navarro, who's the dean of the council and also a longtime advocate for workers' rights.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I want to commend my colleague Evan Glass for starting the year right with this piece of legislation. This is a very important piece of legislation that I think sets the tone for what we continue to do here in the county. The reality is that pay equity is constantly an issue that we try to address. We did have a couple of bills in 2014 and 2015. We were the first actual local municipality to pass a bill that would require data sharing with our county contractors and subcontractors to make sure that we could track these disparities. And it is just so disappointing that it turns out that our own county government was disclosing the data, but there had not been an analysis made. And here, it took this council member to go through it to then identify what really seems to be a systemic issue. And so we have worked so hard to address issues in our procurement law. We work so hard to do things like ban the box when it comes to equity issues. But in this particular instance, I think that this bill begins to shine a light and hopefully begins to correct something within our own county government. And I know that working with the executive and all of my colleagues, we're going to be able to make a difference. So again, I commend you and I thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you.
And thank you for your continued leadership, Madam President. Now I'd like to introduce some individuals who do tremendous work for the residents of Montgomery County. There are 10,000 employees who will be affected by this piece of legislation. We have a tremendous workforce here, individuals who dedicate themselves to making the lives of residents better. So I want to thank UFCW Local 1994 McGeo for their support, as well as SEIU Local 500, all of whom have some members behind me. But there are some members of McGeo that I would like to introduce. I know Lynette Dixon is here, right behind me. There you go, and Rachel Jones as well. Is Rachel here? No, okay, so Jeanette, would you like to talk a little bit? Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Leonette Brown Dixon. I work for Montgomery County Department of Corrections. I've been with the county for 16 years. I'm also a proud member of the UFCW Local 1994 McGeo. Recently, I learned that working women still on average make 80 cents on the dollar compared to their male counterparts. And according to Americans Association of University Women, the pay gap will not close until the year 2119. This is 100 years from now. There are many people who don't want to face the truth of the matter. They claim that the pay gap persists because women make choices like having children or leaving the workforce to care for an ailing loved one. According to the Center of Economic and Political Research, about 40% of the pay gap cannot be blamed on women's choices. As a woman of color, especially in a profession not traditionally chosen by women, I know that prejudice can take a lot of different forms. But the prejudice of pay discrimination does not have to be part of the workforce. Councilmember Glass' legislation addresses some of the ways pay discrimination echoes in ways into our Montgomery County workplaces. I urge you to support the law. Sorry.
Very good.
Well, thank you very much for everything that you do, and you're a correctional officer.
Yes.
So not only you're an employee, but you're doing some really tough work. So,
Yes.
so thank you for everything that you do.
You're welcome.
Yes, here, you want to come?
I'm just going to introduce you.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Clavel. I work for Montgomery County Government, Department of Recreation.
Thank you. Next up, here in Montgomery County, we are working on this piece of legislation, but this is only part of the reforms that need to be done nationally. And I'd like to introduce Andrea Johnson, who is with the National Women's Law Center, to talk about how this fits into the national narrative of women's rights. Hi.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Councilmember Glass, for having me here today. The National Women's Law Center, we work across the country on equal pay legislation, and I can tell you we are seeing cities, counties, states, in all corners of the United States really taking charge and saying no more to this deeply unfair and unnecessary question that is really shortchanging women, families, and our workplaces. And it's time that Maryland do the same, because women and families in Maryland literally cannot afford to wait any longer. We've heard the wage gap statistics for Maryland. Maryland has the 4th largest wage gap for Latinas in the country, and that is unacceptable. So we're excited that the council member has taken this important and crucial step that will help stop the perpetuation of gender and racial wage gaps throughout the Montgomery County government. But it isn't just Montgomery County employees who should be protected from this harmful practice. No Marylander, regardless of who they work for or what county or corner of the state they work in, should be forced to carry lower earnings and pay discrimination from job to job when employers rely on salary history. So we hope that Montgomery County, taking this important step today to stop the use of salary history, will help set the course for the rest of the state to do the same. Legislation is also pending in Annapolis that would say no to salary history throughout the state. And the strong support that we're seeing here today for this legislation in Montgomery County should send a strong message to Annapolis that Marylanders want this legislation, that they want to be paid based on their experience and their skills and the job that they're assuming, not what another job happened to pay them. Thank you so much, Montgomery County, for taking the lead on this issue, and we're excited to see where the state now goes after this. The time very much is now to act on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. As you've heard, this legislation is important for women, especially women of color, but it's also important for women who are re-entering the workplace, who might have taken time off to care for their family, care for their children. And to that point, I'd like to introduce Ms. Ruth Martin with Moms Rising to share her perspective.
Thank you so much. I am Ruth Martin. I live here in Montgomery County in Silver Spring, and I'm Vice President of Workplace Justice Programs at Moms Rising. We are thrilled that Montgomery County Council is taking up this common sense, high impact step to help close the wage gap. It is a simple step, but it is a vitally important one because it means that women who are paid less because of their gender or their race will not automatically carry that disadvantage from one job to another throughout their careers. And it means that women who often take time out of the workforce to care for children or other family members won't get salaries that are below market level when they return to working outside of the home. This is an incredibly important piece of legislation for working moms. It also means that fewer moms will struggle to put food on the table or to pay their rent or mortgage. And it means that fewer of us will face poverty in retirement because our lower wages also reduced our Social Security and our ability to save. It means, quite simply, that the wage gap will close more quickly and more of us will get fair wages and working families will get the boost that they deserve. We are tremendously grateful to Councilmember Evan Glass for championing this bill and to the entire council for supporting it and pushing it forward. And like the National Women's Law Center, I hope that the state pays attention and moves forward there too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Here in Montgomery County, we're fortunate to have so many female leaders, leading civic groups, leading government organizations, serving as president of the county council. And we also have the Montgomery County Commission for Women, which is focused on improving women's lives by promoting sound policies and practices. And to express the sentiment of the commission, I'd like to invite Nicole Drew, president of the commission, to speak.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass. The Montgomery County Commission for Women was established to improve the lives of women and girls in the county, and also to ensure that we advocate for the equal and full participation and of women in the county, and to ensure that women share in the equal opportunities for others, for all in the county. And so we're proud to be here to support this legislation. Recently, the Commission for Women released its 2018 Status of Women in Montgomery County report, and I encourage you all to go to our website, montgomerycountymd.gov/CFW, to take a look at the full report. And while women in Montgomery County have made significant strides, one of the most stark concerns for us is the number of women in Montgomery County who are living in poverty and below the poverty line. An increase of 66% of women since the last time we did this report in 2007. And so this, and especially during Women's History Month, we are very proud of Evan Glass and the rest of the county council for putting forth this legislation, and we look forward to your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Final speaker I'd like to bring up is Chris Hager, who is an economist and also vice president of the League of Women Voters, who share with us the importance of the multiplier effect as it relates to salaries.
First, I would like to read our official testimony from Nancy Bliss, president of League of Women Voters of Montgomery County. We have a long history of supporting legislation that requires equal pay for equal work. We thank Councilmember Evan Glass for his fight for gender equity in Montgomery County, and we support his bill. We believe this legislation helps us take a significant step in closing the pay gap. Discrimination in pay may take subtle forms, and this bill is explicit in codifying language to help level the playing field by hiring workers, by not requesting a salary history for merit-based employees. Montgomery County can lead the way by enacting this important legislation. And then now, as a less formal statement, I do have a PhD in economics, and I'd like to say a few words of my own. That when women, especially when women, and when people, even women, especially women, receive a higher salary, particularly those at lower income levels initially, they are better able to begin to accumulate wealth. A home, a car, additional schooling for their children. They can build more equity, and they can return more money to the local economy in the form of food, clothing, transportation, daycare, other basic necessities. Montgomery County will receive benefits in return for equitable salaries for years to come.
Great, thank you so much for that, Chris. With that, we'll open it up to any questions anyone might have.
Where's the county going to get the extra money to pay all these additional salaries?
So this is the first step in correcting the injustice that has occurred. And as we hire more employees, we will be doing it in a more fair and equitable way. But it does beg the question of what happens to correct the injustice for individuals who are working for the county. Right now, the county executive is still in a search to hire a director of human resources, and that will be my top priority in having a conversation with whomever fits that role.
So this is not retroactive, this is just for re-employees?
That is correct. This bill takes effect 90 days from now, so all future hires will come under this guideline.
Do you anticipate a big fiscal note? Is the county going to be paying out more? Where will the money come from?
We don't know what this ultimately will mean, but it is the right thing to do. And whenever you correct an injustice, you have to shine some sunlight on it. You have to have an open and honest conversation about what has occurred. That's where we are right now. This will incur future conversations, and we'll be able to answer that in a later point.
Is there any thought of doing anything for the 12 up there on the board now?
Right now, we're having this discussion. I appreciate the entire county council and the county executive expressing support for this legislation. Whenever it is passed, it'll take 90 days. There are a lot of hard conversations that are down the road, and we'll be able to answer some of those specific questions later on. Anyone else?
Councilmember Glass, Kate Ryan, WTOP. Are you the first council person to ask this question? We've had women who led the council, we've had women of color who served on the council and who currently serve on the council. When you brought this up to other people, did they say, you know what, we knew this was an issue, but we didn't think we could get anywhere? Or did they say, had no idea? And Mara, if you want to comment as well?
Well, let me just first say that one of the exciting things about joining the council is recognizing that just because we've been doing things this way for 40 years doesn't mean we need to continue doing so. And I shared with you that this idea came to my mind while I was hiring my team within the few days after being inaugurated, and recognized that it was wrong. And it was only after that point that I started digging into the research and finding the alarming data that I've shared with you today. And I know Council President Navarro alluded to previous work they'd done, and you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, specifically regarding the pay stub issue. It was interesting because in my personal experience, having been on the council since 2009, none of my prospective employees had expressed any concern and or was it ever mentioned that pay stubs were demanded. And I know that one of my colleagues, Councilmember Albornoz, has spoken about, as we get into the conversation with the bill, will there be some people that would want to voluntarily, bring up a pay stub and say, hey, we're negotiating here it is. And so this is where we're going to get into the conversation. I think it's interesting, though, that once Councilmember Glass did start looking at the data, started recognizing some patterns and inequities. And I think that once we get into the conversation of the bill specifically as well, then we're going to, I think, be able to dig very deep into what has that data shown specifically through county stat, and, where are the patterns, where do they exist? So it was interesting in a way. It was kind of serendipity that, some of Councilmember Glass's prospective employees were asked for the pay stub, but I know personally that was never an issue that had been that had occurred in my office. So I do look forward to the opportunity to dig deeper. As I said before, Executive Leggett and many of us had been thinking through this issue, and then we were focused on the issue of contractors and subcontractors because that had been brought up as not having data to take a look at that. But now I think it's a good opportunity to do an overarching examination of county government specifically.
Anyone else? Great. Thank you all for coming today. We'll all be sticking around if you have any individual questions. Thank you very much.